Welcome to our Making of Night Sky panel. I'm Joyce Eng with Gold Derby. Today, we're joined by writer and executive producer Holden Miller, showrunner and executive producer Daniel C. Connolly, director and producer Juan Jose Campanella, cinematographer Ashley Connor, production designer Scott Kuzio, and editor Josh Beal. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thanks. I think at first glance, this show appears to be like a straightforward sci-fi series. It follows a couple, Irene and Franklin, played by Sissy Spacek and J.K. Simmons, who have a secret underground portal in their backyard to another planet. And they have a room there and they go and chill and look at the stars. But it's also like a family drama, a romance, a road trip show, a mystery thriller, and like a meditation on aging and mortality and guilt. And I guess we'll start with Holden and Dan. Like, how did the concept of the show come about?
Yeah, I think, for me, it really started off with that relationship drama or dramedy or whatever you want to call it, but something that captured the ups and downs of life, the sadness and the humor, and really was about a long-term love relationship between these two characters, Irene and Franklin, and what was happening to that relationship as they were aging and approaching the kind of final act of their lives, and the questions that were raised by that process. What are we doing here? What is it all adding up to? What does it mean to share your life with someone else? And those are such huge questions that it felt like the story needed to have this science fiction aspect in it to allow us to bring those to the fore and add adventure and mystery and romance and spectacle and fun to it. So that was sort of the genesis of the idea.
Yeah, and I was equally attracted to this material because I think it's so rare to come across a story that has such well-crafted characters and it feels so humanistic and grounded, and to also have that coexist with a massive concept, a massive sci-fi concept. And so what struck me is this was an opportunity to possibly create something that does that very unusual thing of making something both completely grounded, but also asking big questions about kind of what ifs, and has this escapist quality to it. And the fact that those things coexisted so seamlessly in the show was certainly a major point of differentiation and an opportunity.
Yeah, so were you guys huge sci-fi fans in general? Is that why you wanted to incorporate that element into the show?
I think it's fair to say we're sci-fi fans for sure, but I think it was sort of, if Holden, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it was always crafted as something where these two things coexisted, and right?
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely sci-fi fans, but I would say we set out to tell a story about these characters, and the genre sort of made its way into it because it felt right for the story, as opposed to saying, hey, we want to tell a sci-fi story.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think as you watch it, it feels, you don't actually spend a lot of time in space, and it feels very grounded and universal in its themes and relatable as well. And I think a huge part of that is also through JK and Sissy. So did you have them in mind when you were writing the show?
Sissy was definitely at the top of our list, as we were conceiving the show even and sort of developing it. And I think it's such a rare once in a career opportunity when you have someone of that caliber in mind and then they say yes to it. So for me personally, it was so gratifying and such a confidence builder in the show. And then that also gave us some momentum to attract an actor of JK's quality, because I think he certainly wanted to work with Sissy, and so it was definitely something that we were cognizant of, and we knew that we needed two actors of that kind of stature to make the show work, since that relationship is really the beating heart of the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Holden, you have anything to add about casting the two of them?
No, other than that, it was just, we just felt incredibly lucky to have them be part of the show, and that, you know, they're both so incredibly talented, and we knew that going in, but we also, you know, we they had never worked together before, and it's so key to the show that that relationship feels real. And you know, it's credit to the two of them and to our wonderful pilot director Juan Jose Campanella that, you know, within a few minutes of turning on the camera, all the work that they had done, you know, it just the relationship felt real right away, and that was when we knew, okay, this is going to work. I hope.
Yeah, it definitely felt like they've been married for decades, like that the sense of history was there. Well, Juan, let's go to you. How did you come aboard this project? I feel like the Argentina element may have attracted you
No,
to
no,
it.
no. Actually, that came afterwards.
That came afterwards. Wow.
I really don't know how I came about on this project. I think you have to ask them. You know, they called me, and I had worked with Dan in Colony. Dan was a writer in a series that I was a director producer for, and they sent me the script, and I loved the script. I see it much closer to fantasy than to science fiction. I'm not a huge fan of science fiction, depends on the movie, but I am a huge fan of fantasy, of, you know, the Twilight Zone kind of thing. And I saw, and I thought that it was a great modern telling of that kind of environment. You know, I could see Rod Serling showing up after the first scene saying, "Meet the youngs," you know, and it was really great, you know, and I love that the sci-fi elements didn't drown the story, didn't overwhelm the story, you know. So I guess that they were looking for that. They were looking for that idea, so we connected, and you know, and then the work was about like almost a year because of all, you know, in the middle of the pandemic and the quarantine and all that, you know, it was a much longer pre-production that most shows in history had. So that yeah, so that allowed us to really percolate and talk about it a lot, you know, and we were dying to get to the shoot. You know, by the time we got there and we were ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when did the Argentina plot point come in with Stella and Tony then, I guess, for Holden and Dan?
Early on, maybe there was maybe my accent was an inspiration to them. You know, but, they were in Mexico. Yeah.
Yeah, Juan completely inspired it. It's completely, that's the reason that we decided to move in that direction. And I think, you know, just in terms of like why Juan made the most sense to us, it wasn't just because I had worked with him before and I had a positive experience. It was also just Juan has a cinematic oeuvre that speaks to the kind of humanistic storytelling and sort of seeing the humanity in characters that we felt would coalesce so well with Franklin and Irene, whether it's The Secret in Their Eyes or the Weasel movie. It's just we just knew that there was possibility that he would be the perfect candidate to sort of bring a sensitivity and a cinematic feeling to the show, which was important to us.
Yeah, and the look of the show is so important, and you guys really established that in the pilot. And there's
I'm pointing at Ashley here. I don't know if you have I don't know if you
well,
have
then let's go to Ashley.
In the same position that I have.
Because I think you like some of the shots, like you get the sense of vastness, like even in their backyard, but also the sense of intimacy, even when they're in their space living room. I don't know if you guys have a shorthand for that room, but yeah, you feel it feels like very, yeah, like you guys have been saying, like very humanistic. And I love like the warmth and the lighting as well. So can you talk about your approach to shooting the show?
Well, I think I'm a curious choice. I'm not super well versed on like huge VFX scenes. You know, I think I tend to tell more personal stories, but I think that was sort of the trick of the show, was to balance out the sort of sci-fi elements with the personable and like intimate nature of the story. And so for me, that was always at the heart of what drove the story. It was very much about like how, you know, we talked a lot about how the sun and the moon played an element into these people's lives. So all the lighting and the design and the wood all sort of played into this natural element. And like we designed the sets to have large windows. You know, I'm not typically a DP who's traditionally done moonlight, but we knew that we wanted the celestial to play such a role. So it was fun to kind of speak in this Spielberg-esque lighting realm and give myself a little bit more creative freedom to be expressive at night lighting. And I think that that was the fun part about building this world, is that it's reality, but it's not. And we really wanted to give it a sense of wonder and magic to our exteriors and to their experience of the world. And we wanted, you know, in our daytime interiors, which were so beautifully built by Scott and his team, you know, we let hard sun, hard light play an element and play a role, and really tried to let nature speak through, even if we were shooting on a set.
For sure. Well, let's go to Scott, because you guys actually filmed in Illinois. It's set in a small town in Illinois. So I guess, what was the process in scouting locations there? And where was that house? Did you guys actually shoot in that house? Or was that like a set you reconstructed somewhere?
I mean, I forget. I completely forgot. It was actually originally written in a different state, and it was supposed to be like when we had first started prep, and it wasn't a summer film. It was supposed to be a snow film, but a winter film. And so we getting started was very like sort of, how do we find this house? We always knew. I think we always knew what the interior was going to be like, because, you know, the script is very, I mean, it jumps off the page, like sort of the warmth of the home, but it was a huge process trying to find a house. So we scouted all over Illinois. You know, of course, everything wants to be close to the center of Chicago, where we were based out of. But this was the one house that just kept coming along. And I think some of the producers were like, well, it's an hour drive. This is going to be a nightmare. But ultimately, it just was like the perfect home. So it was, you know, it just was the perfect home. It wasn't too grand. It was quaint. It had beautiful setting. And then once we found that house, I was able to like sort of make believe the interior design, like the interior structure of the house. So we had to find the exterior first, so then I could sort of invent what the interior would be like. But the interior is completely different than the actual house. So we never filmed inside the actual location.
So that's, I mean, it should be a real house, that interior, because it feels very inviting. And it does feel like they've lived there for years. Well, how about the
No, one of the decisions that was done somewhat early on, you know, that all of us work with, was the widescreen format, was a 239:1 format, and that dictated, you know, because of what Ashley was saying, that it had to have a grandness to it, but at the same time, very intimate thing. And with that format, you can have, you know, close-ups and a wide shot behind it at the same time. But Scott also, you know, with that format in mind, remember that Scott designed the height of the portals of the house, you know, and everything was sort of designed to that end. And
yeah, we made a point. Like we drew it up in like 3D and like made it this point that we could, at any moment, you can shoot through 5 rooms at a time, but done in sort of a scattered, structured way where it doesn't feel so open, but like you can always get a glimpse of another, you know, 50 feet down the house of another room. So like, because we knew like so much of this takes place in that house that you're like, if it's just sort of blocked off rooms, it can get very, it won't have much depth to it. So that was a big part of how we were like designing it for those shots.
Yeah, for sure. You definitely get that sense that of the background and the depth in the house. But let's go to their space room. What was it like constructing that? Like, I love the look of it because it's like pale, like egg white off color. And I love the circular windows. Like, there's not a lot of sharp corners in there. And I love the way it's furnished. Like, you definitely feel like they've been in there or been visiting it for 20 years. And it's just like a really nice man cave for them to like relax in. So what was your approach to building that set?
Well, like, that took a moment. We started it as like more of like with the ideas of, oh, like what are some sci-fi concepts to it? And I don't think they were hitting like with everyone. So like I just sort of rethought it and sort of took it from sacred architecture, like these these Buddhist temples or churches that are contemporary spaces that, then I think that started to inspire us, like these meditative sort of spaces. And we sort of built off of those ideas of like how that architecture is built.
Mm-hmm.
Then we thought it would be like great to like, you have this space that's quiet and meditative, but then they bring in, it's scripted as well. It was great. Holden made a great script point to it, but that you bring in this comfort of their lives and their home into this sort of meditative space.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I was always a big fan of the Lazy Boys, and they didn't want to put them in, but no, it was the other way around.
Yeah, did you have to fight for the Lazy Boys?
When you're doing something that is that has a fantastic element, sometimes you get entangled into the believability and the logic questions, which are sometimes they don't matter really, to an audience, they don't matter. And to me, there was a big question of how they got the lazy boys there, but it was
very carefully.
They push down the stairs, use the chamber. It works for furniture. So, well, for Holden and Dan, was that how you guys envisioned that room when you guys were writing it?
No, but in a great way, because, I will say when I'm writing, I don't, just speaking only for myself, I don't necessarily, I'm very focused on the words and using the words to convey what the room might feel like emotionally. And then I really wanted to just trust these collaborators that you see on screen here who are much more skilled visually than I am to help bring those feelings or other feelings to life in what it looked like. So I think that it's not exactly how perhaps it looked like in my head visually, but it ended up conveying exactly what I was hoping to. I was so pleasantly surprised by it. It was so great to see something that I wasn't expecting, and I was so happy with it.
Mm-hmm. Dan, what about
I saw it exactly that way. That's a joke. No, we didn't. Like as Holden said, you just hire the right people and you trust them and you collaborate with them, and you keep yourself open to be surprised and kind of flexible to new ideas and ways of seeing things. So I can't imagine ending up with anything other than what we ended up now with. But of course, in hindsight, we had no idea what that was, and it was just a process of trial and error and influences and Scott and Juan weighing in and others as well. So yeah, it was incredibly gratifying to see it built, and it's actually built in a very unusual way. Scott, I don't know if you want to. I think it's built.
Well, we built it with like it had to be like we wanted it to be like perfect in its form, so it had to be like every curve had to be a perfect curve, and so we ended up building it rather than having it like carved out. We ended up building with with robot arms that could build these giant, massive 3D cutting machines, like essentially like the robot arms you see in like an auto factory, but they have little like shaving lasers, and they could do everything exactly to like the dimensions and the curvature that we wanted to do.
Building it was the most futuristic thing about the show.
It's true though, because so much of it is actually on Earth, and but to that point, how did you guys go about designing the planet, and how much of that was like VFX?
It's a similar process. Yeah, it was really a similar process, and it was something that took a very long time to get right, and with a lot of trial and error. But I think our again, because the show is so grounded and realistic, that we knew we didn't want a whiz bang planet that you might see in some big cinema, movie. We wanted something that fit the kind of the voice of the show, and so just from our standpoint, we were much more interested in ideas and aesthetics that felt real and like like visceral, and something you might see in a natural history museum in a diorama, and that experience of 3D-ness on another planet, as opposed to something that just leaped out of a computer.
Mm-hmm. Actually,
Yeah,
you know, the whole what I was saying before about the time that we had because of the quarantine and the pandemic and all that was a blessing in disguise, really, because you know many times you have an idea and the ideal thing is to put it in a drawer and let it there for a month and then look at it again, you know, and see what happened with time, how you change, how what the idea looks like now. And we had that luxury in a way, you know, we were in the design, working on the design with the designer 5 months, maybe, you know, five months until you know that concept was completely defined. And that's a luxury that you don't have in TV shows most of the time, you know.
For sure.
Yeah.
I want to get to Josh because you were saying earlier before we started that you haven't met everyone here because you work in post, obviously. But like your challenge, I guess, is juggling so many stories and timelines on the show because you have the present day with Franklin and Irene. You have the flashbacks to their relationship and you know, their family life with their son. You have Tony and Stella. You have Jude's story, Denise's story. There's lots of moving parts. So how did you approach I guess putting together, you know, just even one episode with so many moving parts to it?
Well, when I read the first script, I was like, this doesn't always happen, but I was when I read scripts, but I was genuinely moved emotionally by the script. Like I felt connected to it, and it was the it was that love that we've been talking about between Franklin and Irene, and the duration of that, and all that they have weathered, and then combined with I connected with the concept of the metaphor that was built into the concept. You know, kind of like the mystery out there. Where do we come from? Where do we go? You know, and it evoked this feeling in me that was very simple, which was just this relationship between Franklin and Irene. And I felt like that sort of served as like North Star or whatever. For me, when I was putting it together, I always would come back to just sort of the simplicity of the emotional truth that was sort of the seed for the whole thing. So in fact, putting it together, I felt like was relatively easy, because as long as you know thematically what you're saying all the time, then that narrows your decision making considerably, or at least enough to like sort of a manageable place. And so I just always was thinking of Franklin and Irene and how that rippled out to the other storylines and characters and stuff. So I don't know. I didn't think of that as being particularly complicated. I mean, you get into issues with pacing, and you know, I think one of the hard things is the emotion requires time usually. But if things take too long, then you tip it, and you know, so into something that maybe is overstaying its welcome or isn't engaging enough. But so it's finding that balance of pace with emotion. I think that was perhaps the most tricky at times.
What was there?
That answers the question.
Yeah, like was there a particular scene that was the trickiest to find that balance of the pace, like spending too long in one story before moving to another?
Well, the scene that I think, like, there's a scene in the first episode between Franklin and Irene at the kitchen table, where they're talking about facing, you know, the end of the road for themselves, and that was really the heart of the whole thing for me. And that was the scene. It's a long dialogue scene between two people at a table. So those are the hardest to cut in a way. I mean, they're not flashy. It's not like an action scene, but two people talking at a table is difficult. And it, but it came together pretty easily insofar as Juan shot it very beautifully. And of course, you're dealing with two actors who are phenomenally talented and knew what they were doing, and were just really on it. And once that came together, and that came together pretty easily, but we did have to play with it a bit in terms of like, should it speed up a little bit here, a little bit there, but you're really like nudging things by degrees and stuff, but it all really can tip how effective something is emotionally one way or the other. But that one was easy and hard at the same time, if that makes sense. It was certainly enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, that was like the one scene I noted to talk about with you guys today, because I thought it was like the perfect scene and really, like you were saying, encapsulates like the theme of the show. And yeah, it's a very long scene, but I love the way it was shot because it starts with them in different rooms. And like you guys were saying before, there's depth in the house, and then she moves to the table and sits down. They have their conversation about him selling the house and if she dies first. So I guess like if we can go around the room, just talk about the entire, from like the conception of the scene to shooting it, like what it was like, I guess, with the Holden and Dan, like just writing that dialogue for it.
Yeah, to me, that was the centerpiece scene of the episode, writing it. And I knew that it had to be right. And I spent a long time on it and really labored over it. And then it sat the same way for a long time. And then if memory serves, quite later than that, I just had this thing where I added the last part of it where Franklin asks her for the more years, was actually kind of a late addition to it. And I think it was one of those things like Juan was saying, you put an idea away for a while and then all of a sudden you look at it again and you think, oh, there was a piece missing and it needs this last bit. Yeah, so I am so happy with how it turned out. And I will say that the idea, I have to give all the credit to Juan. It was totally Juan's idea to have them starting in separate rooms, and the choreography of the scene and the way that they were moving, the two characters moved in relation to each other was Juan's idea.
Well, it's your turn to take credit. You don't remember?
I don't remember, but I'll take the credit. Hey, I take any credit you want to give me. I'll take it. Yeah. No, it's there were a few changes I remember. Yes, it's a wonderful scene. And of course, it all starts on the page, but and it's the environment, the lighting, the material on the walls, everything creates a warm feeling that you want to be with these people, but it's in the end, it's the performances, and if you have those two phenomenal actors with phenomenal faces, with iconic faces, with incredible eyes that you can see into their souls, and JK does just a little twinging in his voice, that just breaks your heart, and it's just great. And those are, to me, those are the challenging scenes, not the observation room, not the big planet, not if we had, which we don't, but if we had battle, space battles and all that. And sometimes when you're choosing to work with people, you think a lot of how are they going to handle the big stuff. And to me, it's much more, it would worry me so much more how they're going to handle that 4-page scene with two people in a room, because that's the one that's harder to survive. Anybody can keep you awake with laser guns exploding in what's the new sound system, whatever, atom or storm, whatever.
Yes.
But just have two people talking in a room, and that's those, and to me those are the scenes that are great.
Those are your action scenes in the show.
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah.
Because they have a later one.
The ones that keep me awake the previous
like
night. The ones that keep me awake the previous night are those scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Not the scenes with the battles, because those are fun, actually. You plan them, the whole team, you strategize, you make little drawings, and when the sound comes up, you throw the bullet, and all those things, and it's it's like a team playing ball at certain point. But those intimate scenes are the heart of it, you know, and that's what makes the show unique, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think being on set, you know, was a master class of acting every day. And it was so wonderful to like watch the most seasoned actors, you know, two of the best of our time, just kind of not face off, but, you know, act together. And I think that that was something that we really wanted to honor. And what we talked a lot about is sort of the difference between, I think, how a lot of contemporary shows approach pacing. And I think what we really wanted to privilege, especially in the pilot, was to establish that the show kind of creates its own internal pacing. You know, it requires you to really watch it and to really feel it. And I think it speaks to the power of those actors and everyone's talent that, you know, they can just hold the frame and hold your attention. And that was sort of a theme for the entire season, was to like, let actors act, let them be the thing that kind of drives the frame forward and drives how we approach coverage, how we approach blocking. You know, it's a show that's really about faces and about interpersonal connections. So we really needed to give face and like give a lot of close-ups. And it was fun to, you know, again, the amount of times I cried at the monitor, you know, they were just beautiful performances to just sit back and watch.
For sure. And I love how in that scene particularly, like you slowly like close in on their faces, and then you have like shallow focus like over the shoulder with one of them out of focus, and it really like gives that intimacy that you guys have all been talking about. Well, Scott, for that scene in particular, was there any adjustments you had to do to the set to make the staging to work? As
well, you know what, we actually what's odd is we actually kind of designed for a shot in episode 2 when he, you know, Juan and I were talking a lot about like how he wants to block this scene where the police officer walks through the house. And I was trying to like, so that's actually kind of like, that was like the scene I sort of designed how the house could work. So it was the one long walk. And then when I started that, and it just allowed like, it kind of just, once we did that, it sort of allowed like every room to have like a perfect vignette of something to work. And I think that for that staging, that was a scene that just happened to work.
It was a multi-purpose room and hallway.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Josh, I want to go back to just editing actors and performances, because you also worked on Bloodline and Counterpart, which starred Sissy and JK, the previous show. So I guess what has it been like to edit two of these great actors on two different shows? And this one, again, such lengthy dialogue-driven scenes between them.
I feel lucky. I mean, it's like people don't talk about it enough, but the most challenging thing, especially working in TV, you know, you can wake up in the morning and open your bins and you know, be confronted with maybe some acting that needs a lot, you know, some help. And you know, on one hand, that's what I'm here for, and I'm here to get like the best out of whatever shows up in the bins. So when you have J.K. Simmons and you have Sissy Spacek show up, as I've been fortunate enough to do on a couple shows now, it's just great because you're not confronted with, you know, you're just, most of the time you're just confronted with good and, oh, that's good too. And sometimes it makes the decision making a little harder because you're like, well, I like that and I like that, and it's like choice fatigue. Jake, they both have very different acting styles, though, which is interesting to watch. But yeah, I mean, my guiding thing with the two of them on whatever on Bloodline or Counterpart or this is like when you're dealing with a talent like that, it's just sort of, I just want to stay out of the way. I just want to stay out of the way. I want to be true to the scenes, and I'm just, it's fun. It's like it makes it a pleasure. Like good actors are just, I cannot sing their praises enough, and I'm so admiring of their contributions to the, I mean, that's probably why I like to edit, is because I love to build performances, and to just piggyback kind of on what they do.
You just sit there and watch as a fan when you get the footage.
Yeah. The only good surprise that you can have on a set is by an actor. Every other surprise is bad news. So yeah, and because it's a one piece of the puzzle that you never fully see until the cameras are rolling, but we have talked and made camera tests, and we know about the lighting, and the lighting we can see, nowadays it used to be years ago that it was the mystery that the DP saw in his head, because we only saw it with a black and white tiny monitor, and before then, not even that. Now you can see what you're getting. Of course, there's a color timing, and there's a lot of processing that you can do afterwards, but you sort of have an idea, but you have no idea what's going to happen with the actors.
And with each take too. So
I'm sorry.
With each different take too, they could bring something different. So
exactly, and they can give a different reading, and you think the scene is going to be moving, and then it's so much more than that, and those are the moments where you really feel that a privilege to be there. That most of the people in the world are going to see it in a screen, and we're seeing it. It's only 50 of us in the whole world that sees it live. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I thank for every day that I'm working on, when that magic happens, and luckily we had a lot of that.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I loved about the scene that we're talking about in the dining room, I don't think it was scripted, but at the end of it, Sissy, and this is unscripted, I believe she goes for his glass of whiskey and drinks it all down.
Yeah,
that was not scripted, right, Holden? That's just something she did on set, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
and it was so good. And then what's so lovely about the way that Juan did it is the juxtaposition between that scene and this cut where we go to them on the couch an hour later or whatever it is,
laughing,
where he's giving her the foot massage, and like the tone has changed, like it's lightened up. And what we don't realize until later in hindsight is that Sissy has this formulation going in her head about what she's planning to do that night. But the foot rub scene after that is so real. It's such a nice counterpoint to the previous heavy scene. Mm-hmm. And it creates this momentum for the story of them going upstairs. It was lovely.
Yeah, it's great. Well, you guys, the season kind of ends on a cliffhanger, or it tees up a season 2. So I guess for Dan and Holden, how much do you guys have planned out? Like how serialized is this?
Well, we finished writing season 1 almost 2 years ago now. So we've certainly had plenty of time to sit with the story and continue thinking about it. It was really important for us that we told what felt like not completed, but a satisfying emotional story in season 1. We didn't want to leave the audience wanting, but I think we also wanted to open up some new questions and avenues. And we love these characters so much and think that there's a lot more of the story to tell. And we had such a great time with the cast and the crew, and this whole team is so fantastic that it would be a joy if we get the opportunity to make more.
Well, lastly, I want to go around the room. If you guys were in Franklin and Irene's position, and you had the chamber space room, would you guys just be content chilling in there, or would you walk outside and step foot on the planet?
I never would have got in there in the first place. I'm burying that thing back up. I'm going inside.
You're not going to take 856 trips.
No. But I'm glad that Franklin and Irene did, because we needed it for the story.
Go out.
I think I would stay I would stay inside the room and just look at the view in my lazy boy.
Yes. Ashley, you would go out?
I would go out, but maybe Irene and I share some things in common.
You're more adventurous.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Spoken like someone who works in production.
Juan will go out as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
Definitely.
would you guys both go out without spacesuits? That's the thing. Take that risk.
Yeah, well, you know.
Okay.
It
I could get some
depends.
scuba,
No
I would get some
spoilers.
scuba diving gear, you know, to sort of have something to breathe on just in case.
Yeah. You cover your bases. Yeah. Scott, what about you?
It would depend on the day. You know, I'm an up and down. Some days I feel like very adventurous and go to the unknown, and some days I'd be like, maybe not. I think I'd probably, realistically, I think at some point I would have gone.
Mhm.
And Josh?
Well, it is. I would cautiously. I mean, if it were there for that long, I'd probably go out. Some point, somehow.
Yeah, 20 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Joyce, I think it's
It
only
might
fair
take
if
me
we ask
20
you
years to
whether-
do it, though.
Whether you go out.
Mhm.
I'll probably just like open the door and see. I don't know. I guess it's also the difference between like taking one step and then going like really far out onto the planet. So
Mhm.
yeah.
I'd be afraid the door would lock behind me.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, you need like a door stopper as well.
Yeah.
Well, it was great speaking with all of you guys. Thank you so much for your time and congratulations on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.